I'd like to begin the next session by giving you a little background on the rationale for why these 6 people and me are up here right now. While we're here in Swansea, we're going to be having tomorrow the business meetings of the General Assembly of Bridges and the Governing Council meeting of Bridges. And at these, we're going to be discussing the strategy for Bridges for the next 3.5 years, the medium-term strategy of Bridges. Now, everybody in this room isn't familiar with the strategy draft document that's been put together for this, but the people on the stage are familiar with that document because it's an important subject of discussion at our meetings tomorrow. And all of the people on the stage, including myself, are part of the Bridges Governing Council. So what we'll be doing is highlighting some of the principles that have been outlined in the strategy document. And we will be discussing whether that strategy is sufficient for Bridges over the next 3.5 years, and in what ways we can more effectively accomplish those ambitions that have been sketched out. Now, what I'd like to do to begin with is to provide a little bit of background context on this strategy by asking a couple of probing questions. The people who are on the stage represent different sectors. We have the academic sector, we have a few academics up here and academic leaders up here. We have civil society represented up here, and we have sort of the policy space, especially in the multilateral UNESCO, particularly kind of policy space in the form of Gustavo, who's up here. So what I'm hoping we can get is sort of digging in a little bit to the priorities that those people bring from their organizations to the Bridges Governing Council, and in what way their organizations can help with the Bridges strategy, insofar as their priorities can also be scaled as Bridges priorities and brought into our own strategic work over the next few years. I also want to think, and I hope we can have a little bit of time towards the very end, about how the people in this room might be interested in some of the ideas that are exchanged in terms of how they might apply to the Wales context. So I'm hoping we'll have an opportunity to take a question or two from the floor before this session is up. And so maybe those of you, Wales is well represented in this room, who could think a little bit about that. What ideas are triggered by some of the ideas we've discussed up here? I'd like to begin with a kind of a broader question having to do with Peter Schlosser and the Global Futures Laboratory context out of which Peter Schlosser comes, and ask a little bit as a sort of a wider way of thinking about what Bridges can and should be doing as a humanities inclusive and a humanities-led sustainability science coalition. What is necessary, in your view, to unlock greater potential for action at scale to be able to meet the great sustainability challenges we're facing in our societies right now? So Peter, have any thoughts on that?
Thank you, Stephen. Well, I think that the first point related to that question is that we have to make sure that people understand that change is needed. I mean, we are actually changing, you know. We are in a situation where our planet is self-adapting, and that lacks the strategic plan behind how we have to adjust to the changing world, which is changing because of our action. And I think that's the point, to understand that our action actually has led to the point where the life-supporting systems are close to breaking, close to not being able to support life as we know it. Now, if we really want to have a meaningful role in academia, we have to change very rapidly from institutions that have spent hundreds of years to fortify themselves against change to institutions that are now asked to provide the knowledge that will guide us through change that has to be as rapid as ever before, right? Much more rapid than what we have seen in the past. And that also means that we have to restructure academia and make sure that it finds its role in society as being mandated actually by society to provide the knowledge that it needs to safely move into the future, rather than being self-mandated in a space that is mainly curiosity-driven and often misses the point of what is needed. What that then means, coming back to bridges and humanities, is that within academia, humanities have to play a much more leading role. Since I have been in academia roughly 3 decades, humanities and social sciences often were not really in the lead role of programs that dealt with environmental change, with the pressures that we have put upon our planet, although they hold the key to what has to be done, which is understanding how we make decisions, including the decisions that got us into a precarious situation with respect to the planet being able to support us. So understanding value systems, understanding how long they are with us, how we can incentivize changing these value systems, and how to make people understand that if they are not making changes now, the changes that will come by self-adaptation or self-regulation of our planet might lead to a fact where life as we know it will no longer be possible. So what I would hope that Bridges and other similar organizations will do is make humanities and social sciences more assertive, make sure that they understand that they are the key to the future, and that they are the ones who also have to stand up and lead programs rather than being attached, as often happens these days, to programs that are led by natural sciences, engineering, and medical sciences. So that is something that has to be built rapidly into a new type of university. And to close off, that is what we are doing at the Global Futures Laboratory. We have designed that entity that's called a laboratory de facto as a university. We have a college within it, we have research centers, we have extension services, we have partnerships. So we are running it like a mini university within a macro university. ASU has close to 200,000 students. That's a macro university, but it has enough space that it can let a mini university form itself, get its structure, and then in essence becomes independent. And that I see as an example of what others could do, not exactly the same way, but in a similar way.
Okay, thanks for, I don't know why this mic. Can you hear me now? Okay, so, sorry. Okay, thank you very much, Peter. And I think I saw Bethany sitting next to you, shaking her head or nodding her head to several things that you said. And I think that this is an interesting sort of opportunity to also turn to an academic member of our panel, but who comes, sorry about that, I don't know why there's such feedback going on, but an academic who comes out of a different sort of knowledge domain within academia. So Peter's coming out of earth sciences, and out of physics and applied physics within earth system sciences, and Bethany really, comes out of a humanities background. And so the same kind of thought, Bethany, drawing on your experience, we've heard from Peter what he feels it's important that the humanities do and need to do from the sort of humanities-centric perspective. From the humanities-centric perspective, what do you feel the humanities need to do, and what must academic programs do and academic institutions do to enable that kind of broader or stronger role for the humanities?
Thank you so much, Stephen. And thank you, Peter, as well. I was nodding especially vigorously when you were describing the mini university within the university. And the reason that I was so sort of demonstrably thinking with you on that, is that I think there's a real role for what I think of as prefigurative learning communities, prefiguring the kinds of knowledge communities that I think we need in the future. And I say prefiguring because I don't think, unlike at ASU, they aren't yet quite there. Bridges, I think, is a prefigurative place, a place where we can model the kinds of interdisciplinary humanities plus sciences, but also transdisciplinary learning communities that are clearly so vital. Another way that I think about the humanities' role in, let's say, learning communities for the future is by actually centering socially vulnerable and climate vulnerable communities. We heard about social vulnerability and social vulnerability indices. In the work that I have done, we have made a real commitment to working with vulnerable communities and doing the kind of ground truthing of claims about the Anthropocene. One of the things I think humanists do really well is kind of bringing scientific claims down to earth and doing a kind of ground truthing of, well, this is a world we have made, a changing climate we have made, but of course we have not made that equally. Many people have done very little to create the kind of climate forcing that we are now doing. And by working with vulnerable communities, we can actually really recognize that the past that we've made, the past that has gotten us here, has left a lot of people really very disenfranchised. And so, for example, stories of techno-optimism and simple transitions to green energy don't ring at all true with them. And I think, in fact, may go a great way to understanding some of the very reactionary politics we currently see really around the globe. I think I'll stop there, but I have a lot more to say.
Okay, thanks very much, Bethany. And I'd like to turn to your neighbor on the panel here, Carlos Alvarez Pereira. Now, you represent really a different kind of sector, which certainly has a strong intersection with the academic community, but which really also has a strong civil society basis as well. And so the Club of Rome as a think tank brings together, I think, a cross-section of different leaders, thought leaders, but actually also industry leaders, business leaders, former heads of state sometimes, or former leaders in the political domain. So what do you see as a particular challenge or a value in terms of how Bridges begins to think about its own strategy in relation either to either of the points that Bethany and Peter have brought up, or in terms of the priorities, for instance, that the Club of Rome brings to the table that you think Bridges could be a good instrument for also helping to realize in terms of more coalescent academic and sort of social in the social space, the link up in the social space.
That's a good question, Stephen. And I would like to emphasize the value of having chosen the word bridges in plural. Because this is an exercise that we are needing in a very critical way. And so I'm talking not only about bridges between academic disciplines, this idea of transdisciplinarity, talking also about the bridges between sectors. So just for instance, there is something which is now getting clearer and clearer, is that different sectors can be in the same place and still don't work together. This is very much the case, for instance, of the COP conferences. I don't know how many of you have attended any of them, but if you have that experience, you will see that, yes, everybody is there, all the stakeholders are there, doesn't mean that they work together. The governments will be in one place, negotiating between them. The academia will be there, speaking basically among academia. The business, private sector will be there, but also in a sort of separate place. And NGOs will be all over the place. But that doesn't mean that all these sectors work together. This is missing. The Club of Rome is engaged in a process that we call the Montpellier process, because it started in Montpellier, trying to develop a methodology to make people from these different sectors. And I think this is one of the experiences that we can bring to bridges, to make real the word. But I also want to speak about another bridge, for which we will need a lot of humility, I think, which is the bridge between the past and the unknown future. All the people here are, in a way, even not only the people, the institutions, are sons and daughters of the world created at the end of World War II. Particularly, of course, the institutions, the multilateral institutions, but also the mental framings, the cultural, intellectual framings. Those are, and in some aspects of those, it's very clear that they are crumbling down now. So it's a little bit the elephant in the room. You know, we cannot imagine the future of the world as an extension in terms of how do we approach the challenges, as an extension of the method which has been going on for these decades until now, among other reasons because that system is imploding from its center, imploding from within the system itself. So, and this is a challenge also for the Club of Rome that we are trying to address. How does the Club of Rome, an organization who cannot deny from its name itself, cannot deny its origin and its demographics, mostly European, massively Western, born in 1968 in a time when we were still able to think of global challenges in ways of solving global challenges through multilateral system of governance, how can we still be relevant in the world which has escaped from that? Most of the world has escaped from the West, and the West itself is committing suicide. So there is also, I leave it here, sorry for the provocation, but this is my role, but I also see these bridges, in plural, in a way you very well chosen, as I said. It's also the bridge between the world we knew and in which we were comfortable and we are still comfortable, relatively, and a future that is not ours, that is yet to come.
Thanks very much. So, a lot of food for thought there. And I'd like to turn to Gustavo to your left, who's really representing this sort of intergovernmental multilateral policy space at UNESCO. And one of the questions I'm wondering about, thinking about how Bridges orients its own strategy and how we would like to see certain initiatives followed up on the ground. I can remind those of us, the audience in the room, that the Bridges Coalition is nested within the intergovernmental MOST program, an international science program that is itself managed within the social and human sciences sector of UNESCO. So I wonder about, as far as Bridges' priorities, among which we could say promoting transdisciplinarity, promoting knowledge systems and giving respect to knowledge systems that is across the range of scientific, humanistic, human and social sciences, as well as applied engineering and technical disciplines. When we think about all of that, I'm wondering how you see Bridges' strategic ambitions, as we'll be talking about them more and more tomorrow in our governance context, in relation to the priorities of MOST, the MOST program, Management of Social Transformations, and UNESCO more broadly.
Thank you, Stephen, and you probably are a bit bored of hearing me in the previous panel, so I'll try to be quick. Yes, Stephen was talking about the MOST program. I don't know if you know it. It's the MOST is the acronym for Management of Social Transformations Program. And it's a science-based program in the sense, nestled in the social sciences, by the way. UNESCO is divided in sectors where social and human sciences, I must add. The idea is that we want to promote, to strengthen the link between science and policy, promote evidence-based policies, especially when looking at the implications of social transformations, of global transformations, such as climate change. That's why the report we just spoke about, but it could be others, emerging technologies, demographic change, you name it, and how they impact social outcomes, including inequalities and others. So in the sense, as a science-based program, what we are very clear is that we need the transdisciplinary research. We cannot get somewhere and find a solution if we don't go beyond our normal frames of mind or the usual frame of mind, not normal. And my colleagues have spoken a bit about this. Peter started talking about the institutions, for instance, and institutions, indeed, they frame a bit what the way we think. They're very important because they are what makes things work and give some certainty, but we have to change the way we're thinking about problems. Earlier on, we were talking about this report from UNESCO, from the MOST program. If we don't ask the right question is it, how do we reduce emissions to combat climate change? Well, it's an important question. But what we're saying is, well, we probably have to ask further questions or a broader question. It's not just how we reduce emissions, but how do we ensure that we get that the result that we're getting leads to more equitable, more resilient, better livelihoods for all, better societies in general. And that includes fighting climate change, of course. So that means changing the way we ask questions and, of course, making sure we do this in a way that it's not siloed. We find, for example, that most of the research on sustainability, over 80% of the research on sustainability comes from the natural sciences with a natural science lens. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with those studies. What's wrong is that we're not having the lens from humanities, from social sciences. In the same way, most of the protected biodiversity areas in the world are mostly in lands densely populated by indigenous populations, but we don't consider their knowledge or their points of view when deciding issues pertaining to biodiversity. So for MOST and for UNESCO, it's very important to promote this transdisciplinary research. And as an intergovernmental organization where we work with member states, they are our bosses, to say it, and we try to get them to rethink questions and bridges is certainly very important to achieve that. We have, for instance, a recommendation on the ethics of AI to change how we think about AI, a recommendation on open science, a recommendation on protection and safety of scientists, and all that means changing the way we look at things. And Bridges, I think, and the strategic orientation of Bridges is fully aligned with that view, with what we want to do in MOST. And it's very important to be able for UNESCO to also work with member states to change the views of governments and change the outputs of governments in that regard. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gustavo. Given that you just brought up the example of indigenous communities, I wonder, turning to Erika now, who has a lot of experience, both as an academic researcher, but as a practitioner who's worked very closely with indigenous communities, as we heard earlier in one of the sessions before this. I think a little bit about the observation that you just made, Gustavo, in that there was a report that came out a few years ago out of the UNEP space, the UN Environment Program, which had been emphasizing how the world's remaining biodiversity were in lands that were managed in an overrepresented way by indigenous communities. And so the contradiction that indigenous communities have not broken into the policy space to an extent, and other local and traditional communities have not broken into the policy space when so much is at stake in the lands, actually, that are being managed by many of these communities is an inherent contradiction that really needs closer work. And so I'm wondering what thoughts you have about the importance of these kinds of questions in terms of the bridges strategy as we begin thinking about how we can have greater impact.
Yes, it's working? Yes. I would like to mention the recent program from Bridges, the Mapping and Validation Program.
Okay.
I think it's a very important program. I was recently invited to join this program and kindly invited. And I think that it could really help many communities, not only validating their initiatives, but creating a forum that they can be part of Bridges. And then I have some notes. For example, validation not only consolidated good practices, but also emerging initiative with high transformative potential. The Bridges certificate would then symbolize belonging to an international community, not only receive a validation, but they can work with Bridges community with participatory processes and support from mentors. Another note, the territorial and thematic forums, creation of participatory forums in territories and around priority subjects. These will be places for exchange, mutual support, active listening, and policy formulation based on real practices. And Bridges mentorship network with associated hubs, proposal for direct involvement of Bridges hubs as active mentorship nodes. Hubs will support local initiatives and foster inter-hub collaboration based on thematic and territorial intersections. So I think that it could be a very important initiative for formation of a global community of innovative practices, strengthening of territories as spaces of collective intelligence, and expanding collaboration and integration among Bridges hubs. So I think that it could improve our dynamic, of our work dynamic, and really support communities, not only validating their initiatives, but that they can be part of Bridges as a group, a work group from different initiatives working together. I think it could be a very interesting experience for Bridges and for hubs, mentoring communities in a not a hierarchical way, but listening and answering and dialoguing about their issues, their projects. I think it could be a very interesting step, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Erika. And I'm going to turn now to the only person we haven't heard from yet. It's a mistake that you happen to be sitting at the other end of the platform here. But the World Academy of Art and Science, Janani, you're the Secretary General of the World Academy of Art and Science. WAS has an interesting kind of dynamic in terms of its constitution, who's in WAS, that I think it, in some ways, reflects the kind of variety that we see in the Club of Rome as well. And so the civil society space is very important within WAS. But obviously you have connections as well to industry, to academia, and so forth through individual membership. So what do you think is a priority within WASP right now that we within Bridges maybe should be thinking about integrating more fully or effectively into our own strategic aims?
Thank you, Stephen. I'm sure in the past few years, all of us have had this experience. Just when we thought things couldn't get any worse with the world in general, we realized that we were wrong. And all of us have been trying to solve the problems in different ways in our different fields. What we at the World Academy of Art and Science have been doing is studying all the problems to see if there's anything common to all of these. What are the root causes of the social turbulence that is giving rise to all of these individual issues in different parts of the world? And what we see is they do have a few things in common. They all transcend boundaries, disciplinary, social, political boundaries, and they defy solution by sectoral, piecemeal strategies. And all of them, in one way or another, are caused by outdated strategies, policies, thinking, understanding. So what we finally realize is that with the right understanding starts the right policies and strategies and solutions. So we are basically a think tank, and we focus on the theory. And so that is the idea that I would like to propose to Bridges, that we understand social change. What are the conditions that bring about social change? What are the catalysts? What are the catalytic strategies? How does change happen? How is it successful? When is it temporary? When is it permanent, inclusive, comprehensive? And if we could come up with this theory of social change, that could be a blueprint that we could, that is invaluable. We could offer it. Anybody could use it. Since morning, we have been hearing a lot of inspiring stories, success stories. Any successful movement has to have this inspiration from below to be matched by strong, responsible leadership from above. And I believe Bridges can offer this thought leadership, this strong theory, how we can manage social change. And why is it important? Because change, we have all had, we have all seen change, social change, transformation has been there. It has largely been sort of chaotic, unconscious. If we can study this theory, if we can see how we can bring about change, social transformation consciously, we can make it fast, we can make it effective, and we need to do that quickly because there are just too many people who are being left behind. So I believe that if we could come up with this theory of social change, and the World Academy is happy to bring to the table all of the resources that we have, convening capacity, membership, expertise, so we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janani. I should mention that, among the ambitions that are already mapped out in the draft program for Bridges' strategy for the next 3.5 to 4 years are the following: strengthen transdisciplinarity and knowledge ecosystems. We've heard a fair bit about that today. Expand the global coalition, build upon the Bridges Coalition, and develop a stronger network and a wider network of members and hubs. Empower, we just heard this from Janani, but empower inclusive participation and leadership. And then a fourth we heard from Erika, which was work on validating and amplifying high impact initiatives that deserve better visibility, among other things, because they're happening sometimes in niche spaces where important transformative efforts can be taking place and often are taking place but aren't well known. So I want to put everyone in this panel now on the spot a little bit and ask you to put Bridges on the spot. And I'm going to do it in a little bit different order than I just did, rather than just going in reverse again. And I'm going to put you on the spot by asking you in a minute or so to identify, if you could, one thing that you think Bridges has the potential to do but may not be doing yet, or hasn't identified as something that it maybe should be doing yet. And then come back with that suggestion to us so that we can bear that in mind when we're talking about our strategy tomorrow. And I'm going to begin in the middle this time. So I'm going to begin with Carlos, and we'll work from the middle back out to the ends.
Yeah, because you are sure that it will not be difficult for me to put Bridges on the spot. So, yeah, I will take your word. I think since Bridges has at its core humanities, It knows, the people involved know very well that there is an extreme diversity of worldviews, cultures, traditions, and epistemologies. And by the way, it's fantastic that this is an initiative in collaboration with UNESCO, because, to be honest, I think in the UN system, UNESCO is the organization which is most aware of that diversity. Maybe not the only one, but the one which is most aware in the deep sense of the term. And I think we have to be humble and bold at the same time, bold enough to say it's no longer the time to invite other or to include other perspectives. This is not enough. You know, again, coming back to the example of the COPs, in the COP of biodiversity in Cali, there was a real effort to include divisions by indigenous peoples. But sorry, the indigenous, they call themselves originary peoples, have other epistemologies in which nature, as very well exemplified with the Kogis, nature is not separate from humanity. By the way, many of the people from originary cultures are saying one way or another, not more nicely or more rudely, please give us a break. You know, because they know they will survive without us. You know, I mean, they know they will survive because they are in symbiosis with nature. So the Kogis has this very elegant way of calling us little brothers, which is another way of saying we are spoiled kids. So the challenge is when you are in the context of a COP of biodiversity with all the conceptual development, which is still based on the foundations of Western modernity, and Piero made some comments about that, you know, separation from nature, reductionism, splitting a complex system into pieces to try to solve each of the pieces, etc., defining a multiplicity of goals. How do you reconcile that with a completely different epistemology in which humanity is not separate from nature? You would have to restart again, and then it's no longer about including them, because inclusivity is something is when you organize a party at your home, you are the convener of the party, you set the rules, and you decide who you invite. This is no longer the role for us, for the Western world. We have spoiled the world, we have created a gigantic mess. We have to have the humility to recognize that. And from that humility, restart by building on the epistemologies of the others.
Okay. Thank you, Carlos. I'm going to, because we only have a few minutes left, I'm going to challenge everybody to keep their comment kind of incisive and focused. So I'm going to go to Bethany now and ask the same question. What do you think Bridges can do that it's not doing yet, or do more of that it is doing more effectively?
Yeah, thank you. I was really struck, Carlos, by when you said the rest of the world has escaped the West a couple of comments ago. And I was thinking, yeah, thank God, right? Because what they're escaping from in many cases are colonial or neo-colonial relations. And what I really think that I'd like Bridges to do is to really take that quite seriously and to think about what we Bridges can do, mostly from very privileged places, to redistribute resources that we have. One of the things that I take very seriously is redistributing my wealthy universities' money to my community partners. So all grant money I get, I re-grant. And to collaborate with us, you also have to re-grant. So I would like Bridges to really do more of that.
Thanks very much, Bethany. I'm going to jump over to Gustavo again and put you on the spot to ask you, what would you really love to see Bridges do the most?
If we ask everybody in this room, do you think transdisciplinarity is important? Everybody says yes. we all think you should look at indigenous knowledge as well. Yes, we're going to agree on all these other things. What I think the problem is that even though we're probably all right and believe in that, the rest of the world may not. And one thing that Bridges has to avoid is talking to people who just think the same thing, like we all do in this room, which is very easy to do because it's comfortable, it's easy, everybody agrees. And I see it all the time at UNESCO when you have to put an idea and you have different points of view because the governments have different points of view, and it's hard to get ideas across and find a common purpose. It's very costly, it's very complicated. But Bridges has to do that, and it has to do that not because we say it's yes, it's important to use indigenous knowledge, whatever. We have to put it in a way that also speaks to the language that exists and it's prevalent. For instance, of what's considered good science and rigorous science, using the tools appropriate. So in a way that even, scientists working in science are going to say, this makes sense. They're not talking to me at some abstract idea. This makes sense, and I can see it in terms of what I'm working on and using the right the methodologies that make sense and are rigorous. So we have to really stretch to make sure that we're convincing, but in the language that makes sense for the world of science, for the world of policy, and not just because what we say sounds nice. I'm not saying we do that, but we don't do enough of...
Thanks very much. And so one of the takeaways I get when I hear that is challenging the humanities maybe, because we are a humanities inclusive and have a strong humanities center, though we're applying that to sustainability science, is the idea of not being stuck exclusively in the theoretical space, it seems. But Erika, could I ask you to challenge us with a similar idea? Or not the similar idea, but the same question.
Yes, I absolutely agree with all our colleagues. And I think that Bridges could expand the dialogue with local communities and ask them what Bridges means and what they expect from Bridges. I think, or I am convinced that we will receive precious answers that can give us, expand our perspective and our work. I think that many colleagues work with local communities, and we could have a forum to ask them about their vision.
Thanks very much. And Janani, I'm going to come to you with the same question, please.
Bridges has done a fantastic job of showcasing, highlighting a lot of success stories. What I would like to see done is to highlight it in such a way that it can be replicated, it can be scaled up globally. That would include everybody. So show how that can be done, show the strategy, show how the success story in one region can be replicated anywhere in any location, situation.
Thanks, and we seem to be coming almost back to the idea that we began with the first question I asked Peter. And I don't want that to necessarily suggest that that's going to be his answer, but if you had your wish and you said, I would like to see Bridges do more of this or do this better, what would it be, Peter?
Focus on the fundamental challenge that we have in the world right now, which is a unique situation where we have a confluence of tremendous environmental pressure at a time where society is rewriting the world order, as we have heard. And that societal unrest, the vibration that we see around the world, the collapse of systems that have worked for 80 years and have been kept in place for too long, makes it much more difficult to focus on environmental issues. They, in turn, have a negative feedback on what society can do. So we are going into that negative feedback spiral of societal unrest at a time when we have unseen so far pressures that are created by our decisions. So taking on that big problem and then see how we can use transdisciplinarity, this and this and this, as a tool, but really help to understand in conversations with society and make them understand that this is a unique moment in history, that we have to learn from history, that we have to understand what our choices so far have done, and how we can make different choices that hopefully take some of the pressure off the place that we call home. And there is actually no better part in academia and other sectors than social science and humanities to help us learn from history, help us understand this unique moment in history, and help think through what the options are looking into the future using all the bridges that Carlos talked about.
Thanks very much. And, these have been some really excellent suggestions, and I think that they may be resurfacing, I suspect, in some of our discussions tomorrow. I want to be true to my word and ask, is there anyone in the room who would like to bring up something maybe from a Welsh perspective, in a Wales perspective? Do you have, yeah, please. Could someone help with a mic, running a mic out there maybe? Thanks. We've got just a couple of minutes left, but I do want to hear a couple of voices from Wales, especially.
Hi, I'm Jeevan. So I'm from the Leadership Academy that is run from the Future Generations Office. And just to thank the speakers, it's really great to hear your expertise. As you were speaking and during the day, what occurred to me is to ask about kind of what pathways we're co-creating and co-constructing for young people. So I know that there's been a lot of talk about kind of within education, within universities, but I'm thinking potentially prior to that, or for people who maybe don't go down that educational route at universities, because obviously, there's so many young people that have different pathways and there's not a one size fits all. So I was just keen about that, to kind of voice that perspective and understand how we're engaging people that are obviously very keen to be part of this conversation, but may not, for reasons around systemic inequalities, may not be able to access higher education. So I just thought it'd be really great to hear your take. And thank you for sharing everything so far as well during the session.
Thanks very much. And is there anyone else from a Wales perspective that you'd like to sort of throw into the hopper here for us to be thinking about? Yes, we've a little next table over, if you could share the mic.
I just feel that we need to talk about a life-sized paradigm. So we're talking about the individual. So in Wales, there are so many different challenges for all of us. It's a very rural community out there as well, outside of Swansea and Cardiff. And life is very different. It can be a real struggle. So some of these big ideas that we're talking about, I'd really like Bridges to bring those to ordinary people and have more local discussions around these ideas that we've heard today, which are fantastic. But so it becomes something that's in people's hearts that they feel connected to and want to be part of, building a future together for our very precious Welsh young people. Yeah.
Thanks very much. And I think that harmonizes very well with the last comment we heard, wasn't it? Well, let's take one more from the back at the very next table, and then I think we're probably, unfortunately, out of time, and I don't want us to get too off track with the schedule.
Hi, I'm Lewis Dean. I'm head of the Wales Innovation Network. There was a comment that I think reflects on some of the opinion polls that are results that are coming out in Wales at the moment, that touches on some of the work some of the conversation you were having, is that we are seeing some, a real variety and a real schisming of public opinion and looking at very different political dimensions, and just ensuring that the stories that we tell and the conversations that we are having are resonating with the new world in which we are finding ourselves. And I know there was some conversation on the panel, but it doesn't feel at the moment that in parts of the world the populists have the strong narrative, and how we think about the work that Bridges is doing in that context.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all of those comments, and I hope that when when we end for the day, we're going to have an opportunity, if anyone wants to stick around and chat and have a drink or whatever, we'll have that opportunity. So I hope we'll have a chance to talk more for any perspectives that there wasn't time to fit into here now. But I do want to thank the panel very much, the Governing Council members who are here physically in Wales for our meeting tomorrow, and I appreciate very much all of the ideas that we just heard. So thank you. And